My name is Nyuol Tong. I am really honored to be here. It means a lot to me to be given this space to share a few things. I'm from South Sudan, and as you know, Sudan is not the happiest place. And so to be here and to talk, it means nothing more than to share the stories of those people. For those of us who were born into hard realities or circumstances, it is easy and even understandable to construct a self-celebrating narrative. It helps us to tell the story of our people because a self-celebrating narrative has a protagonist, one person usually, that the audience can relate to. But really today, I don't want to talk about that self-celebrating narrative that I do to raise funds for the school I'm building in my village. Today, I want to tell a story of narrative, a narrative of gratitude. Because I am a creation of many people. I was born in a small village in South Sudan in 1991 when the civil war was still ravaging the country. As a child, I witnessed the sky rain with bullets and the earth tremble with bombs. This was my reality. This was my childhood. Everything was fleeting. People died just like that, with the twinkling of an eye. After an attack that almost killed me, my mother took my family to northern Sudan. And there we lived in cities of tents, just like most South Sudanese. It was harsh there. There was no electricity, there was no hospital, there was no school, there was nothing. My mother worked from sunrise to sunset. We were poor. We lived in a tent and shared one bed, a three-legged creature that shrieked most of the night. But my mother always told us this was not our home, that we shouldn't be ashamed or upset about the poverty that we were living in, that someday the war would end and we'd go back to our village and united with our father and our people. And that thought made everything bearable, however painful or however difficult. And that was my mother. She had a way of making everything seem easy and surmountable. That was her gift to us. Grace and resilience, that's what she gave us. As we lived in the cities of tents that I just mentioned, in a sense, I began to observe my surrounding. I was really bored and I had nothing to do, and the notion of going to school sounded cool. I didn't have any particular notion what school would mean ultimately. And so I began to think about going to school, but I wouldn't ask my mother because she barely made enough money to put me in school. But I could see in her eyes how much she wanted me to go to school. I could see it when she watched little children from the neighborhood going to school in their blue and green uniforms and water bottles dangling attached to their school bags. My mother would look at them. She would sigh and bite her lower lip and squeeze my hand. It was a shared dream that someday that I had to go to school, but we couldn't afford it. And so that my mother's valuation of school, or how she valued school, she sort of translated into us. And so when I was 9, for no particular reason, I began to collect books and magazines. And people said I was crazy, I was silly. It covered our little tent that had one bed. But my mother loved that. And I recall that after work, a long day of work, she would come and help me dust the books and arrange them in the tent. And we would arrange them by the colors of their covers because we didn't know, we couldn't read the titles. And I would read her from my imagination, stories, pretending that I was reading whatever book I happened to hold. She would just listen to my stories, knowing that they were invented. But she would say, keep reading. These authors are really brilliant. I kept doing that, and ultimately, a friend of mine from the soccer field told me that if I had school uniforms and school supplies, I could go to the nearby school, which is a public school. Of course, I couldn't tell my mom because that would just make her worry more. So I worked for a year. I think I was 10. You know, I washed cars, I babysat children, I did all kind of menial jobs and made more than I thought I would. And I went to the market, I bought the school bags and school uniform. And that morning, my friend Bashir and I went to school, we're excited. Bashir taught me some Quranic verses and the Sudanese national anthem that the students were required to recite in the assembly before classes. The assembly went well. Bashir and I were beginning to plot schemes for the rest of the semester. You see, we loved the movie Lethal Weapon. Bashir was Mel Gibson because he was short, light-skinned, and I was Danny Glover for obvious reason. I'm tall and black. And in the assembly, you could see whom were going to be our victims after school, the bad guys that we're going to subject to misery. The assembly went well. And on our way to the classrooms, one of the teachers asked me to see the headmaster. I was taken there, and soon I was dragged out. I was told I couldn't go there. That day I went to the Nile and burned everything I had worked for a year. Everything I ever wanted almost evaporated with that ash. I hated the world, I was angry, I was mad. I hated Bashir, although I knew he didn't know I would be rejected after I had met all the requirements. But I hated him anyway. But it seems that every tragedy in my life always leads to something good. So I had no friend, I was lonely, and I had to entertain myself. So I began to draw images from memory, images of my village, of people that gave me company. And so one day a college student stumbled upon me drawing an image of Mustafa Sid Ahmed, a famous Sudanese musician. I mean, any guy could really draw him. The guy had a circular hat, he wore circular glasses, he had a circular face, he has a beard which makes his mouth circular, just a few circles, big ones and small ones. We had Mustafa Sid Ahmed. But this college student thought I had done it well, or brilliantly, and asked me to join a center that she had organized to teach underprivileged South Sudanese kids. We joined, we had 6 months of intense learning, but our center was demolished 6 months later. And I think government was right. I mean, those kids, 90 of them and 4 college students, were a threat to the regime. So my education was ended. But Viviana Francis, the college student, showed us things we didn't know about ourselves, the history of our country, that Sudan was ours, and that with education we could reclaim it someday and even rebuild it. That my education was my power and my freedom. And that remained with me. And so by 2003, when we moved to Egypt, because we heard that in Egypt there were better opportunities for refugees, you had better lives, and maybe a chance to be resettled in the United States, I already had my mission to get education and come back to my country. But Egypt proved to be a failure. There was no school for refugees. The only schools we had were what they call informal schools, which were meant to keep kids off the streets. And so again, I had an impediment. But then again, somebody showed up, a Catholic priest who said that, all right, I'm going to give you books. I can't afford to put you in private school, but I'll have you read. It was interesting, being a Catholic priest, but he gave me theology books, philosophy books. That opened a new world of ideas for me. And learning was not just about Sudan anymore. It was about finding solace and guidance, and learning became a way of living and understanding not just the world around me, but the world within me too. And that changed me forever. And then Egypt, we had to leave. A peace agreement was signed in Sudan, and we had to go back home because for us to come to the United States, we had to present a case to the UN, a case that had a uniform history, sort of one story about the family, and Mom would not want to compromise. So we didn't get a chance to come to the States, so we're going back to Sudan. I'll probably be a cowboy right now. And several months later, another person showed up to save me from going home and never get the chance to get education. Brook Comer, an American professor. And she came looking for students to attend her writing workshop, which I did. So after 3 months or so, a FedEx package arrived at our doorstep. It was the first mail in the history of my family. I didn't even know we had a functional address. So we opened it, everything in English. We can read English. We called one of the priests who came and found there were 2 letters, a letter of acceptance and then an award of scholarship to a boarding school in California. It made no sense. I don't know what Brook did, but in the fall of 2006, I found myself here. In that boarding school, although my English was limited, I saw the true gift of America to humanity. The unyielding belief that there's no such a thing as too big a dream. And going to college was no longer some improbable dream. It was pretty much possible. And so in 2010, I found myself at Duke, attending Duke on a merit scholarship. And the scholarship is named after, is in honor of a Duke student, Reginaldo Howard Memorial. Reggie, as we called him affectionately, was a sophomore at Duke when he died in a car accident. He had many dreams. He was the first black student elected president of the Duke University student government. And every year we celebrate Reggie. And when we do, I always think, are we lamenting or celebrating Reggie's death? Because after all, I'm a Duke because of his death, in a sense. And that's not an easy question. And it requires a complete honesty. What does it mean? What does it mean to know that you would not be where you are, that you would not be what you are, that you would not be who you are, had it not been for someone else? This realization just made me see how everything that I have been taught since I came to America, going to high school, it was all about me, going to college, pursuing my dreams, all of that. It was up to me to work hard and get rich or get popular, and everything else was subordinated into that story, that self-celebrating story of the survivor, the hero's journey, if you will. What does it mean to know that we all exist because of someone, whether we know it or not? I don't know about others, but to me, it means this, that I will do my best to strive, to help others, not out of charity, but out of this responsibility that Maya Angelou captures eloquently, that nobody can make it out here alone. So this is the narrative of gratitude that I want to share. This is the truth that I have known and that I will try to live by. This is the reality that inspires me to hope, that dares me to dream or believe tomorrow will be better. This is the message that I draw from my struggle, from my people's struggle, and try to share with the world. So thank you.